There's big scandal at Disney. The CEO is out. They're bringing the old guy back in. A lot of people are dissecting what went wrong, and a lot of people are criticizing some of the shows that have been released recently. And one of the ones that gets a lot of criticism is She-Hulk. But I am here to educate you all about how She-Hulk was objectively good. Objectively good. It was a good show. It was a well-written show, and I'm going to explain exactly why. So stay tuned. Hey guys, it's me, and I'm making a video that I wanted to make for a while because I'm kind of passionate about it. It's about She-Hulk. So Disney Plus have been making a bunch of shows. They had Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, and they've got Star Wars ones like Andor and The Mandalorian. And there's been a mixed kind of reception to some of them. And one of the ones that's got the biggest amount of criticism is She-Hulk. And people have been really toxic about it. I mean, I go onto YouTube, and for some reason the algorithm is always throwing up a guy called Jeremy at The Quartering. And The Quartering is a channel where he goes on about anti-woke stuff and stuff like that. And he was gloating about how terrible She-Hulk was. And it kind of upset me, because I was watching She-Hulk and I enjoyed She-Hulk. And I didn't just enjoy She-Hulk because it was entertaining. I enjoyed it because I thought it was actually really, really well put together. And I'm making this video because I'm kind of frustrated with the fact that I can't go on social media without people telling me that I should hate this and I should not like that. It's like, oh, Andor is wonderful. And then like, Miss Marvel, it's woke nonsense. And Wakanda Forever is woke and it's fail. It's like, for God's sake, can't anyone just watch something and enjoy it? Like, can't you just watch something and enjoy it? And She-Hulk especially is something that I watched and I enjoyed and I thought was good. And I'm kind of pissed off with all of the people just laying crap at it, because they are talking garbage. And they really are. And that's the thing. It's just so toxic. It really, really upsets me. The person in charge of like She-Hulk as a show, the showrunner, I guess, is a woman called Jessica Gao, who's a writer. And if you go onto Twitter and look at what people are tweeting her, it's actually kind of disgusting. I mean, I've got some up here. This guy called Knight, the quiet_Knight, that sent a message to her that said, Marvel should never, ever give you a job again. Whack ass shit. I mean, I don't, as a creative person, as a writer, if somebody, even a complete stranger, sent me that message, I'd be quite upset by it. Because you pour your heart and soul into what you make creatively, and to have someone give you a message like that, ugh. What else have we got here? This guy called Farkas David, who wrote, She-Hulk equals poop emoji. Please stop writting. Thank you. Thank you with a U. Wow. Farkas, you really are taking the Farkas, aren't you? That's fine. I mean, you don't have to like She-Hulk, but again, as a creative person, if someone tweeted that to me about a book that I wrote, then I'd be quite upset, even if I thought that they were a bunch of Farkas. Who's another guy? Bruce Wayne emailed her, well, tweeted her and said, you created a disaster show if She-Hulk. You couldn't leave the comic as it was, right? Question mark. Had to add your, ye are, liberal BS and F it up. Good job, dumbass. Not dumbass, Dumas. Like the author of The Three Musketeers with a lisp. Dumas. Anyway, yeah, Bruce, calm it down, mate. Oh, and who else we got there? Good Take, Bad Take wrote, sorry to disappoint you, but there will not be a season 2 of She-Hulk, I presume. The series was a flop. Not being a jerk, just stating facts. The series was hated by the majority. The last show you saw was the series finale. They most likely will do a soft reboot on the character. Well, thank you for sharing your amazing insight into the future. Shut up, Good Take, Bad Take. Okay, one more. Parv Agral wrote, you were a terrible writer, Miss Chairman Gao. Why can't any of these people actually spell? You're a terrible writer, Miss Chairman Gao. She-Hulk show was neither good as comedy nor as superhero show. Please don't ruin these gems of actors on your terrible writing. No season 2 for this shit show. Hope Titania gets better writer in future. It's writer. There's one T. One T. And Jake Silver, what character are you destroying next? I mean, God. Who gets so upset by a TV show that you have to go online and talk shit to the creator? I mean, if you don't like it, switch it off. There's plenty more content to watch. But here's the thing. Okay, you don't have to like She-Hulk, but it was good. It was actually really, really good. And let me explain to you why, because it's kind of important, right? She-Hulk was objectively good, which means if something's subjectively good, it's good to your subjective experience. Like the Kingsman movies, I liked Kingsman 2 better than I liked the original Kingsman because subjectively it really ticked all my boxes with the way they used the music and everything set in America and stuff. So subjectively is when you have an opinion. And all these people out there who watched She-Hulk and didn't like it, they probably have subjective reasons why they didn't like it. Objectively is when you look at all of the components from an objective and impartial place and decide whether or not it's good. And objectively, She-Hulk was a great show. It's actually, I think, the best female superhero origin story that Marvel have done, and they've only done 4 of them. It was very entertaining and it was very authentic, and I think that's the thing that people don't like. Everyone's using this term woke at the moment, and it's difficult to explain what it is. I think for a lot of people, woke is like, oh, if you flip one of the pre-established comic characters and make them black, that's woke. That's political correctness gone mad. You can't have this, you can't have that. And I understand to a certain extent where people come from with that, but I don't think it's about inserting those things. I don't think it's because if you look at woke as a bad thing, then basically you're saying like, oh, if you have people of colour in your TV show, then that's political correctness gone mad. If you represent these people as human beings who exist on this planet, that's political correctness gone mad. No, I don't think anybody who argues against woke stuff is arguing that. I think woke, to be honest, is a term that people have come up with for things that seem inauthentic. For example, 2016's Ghostbusters. A lot of people said it's woke. People who criticized that movie got slammed as being sexist because they swapped up the 4 male leads for 4 women instead. And it was very difficult to criticize that movie without being accused of being a sexist. And it was also very difficult to criticize the mistakes that movie made without sort of kind of targeting certain creative choices, like the fact that they swapped the 4 male characters for 4 female characters. It's not that there were women leading the movie that made that objectionable. It was because it was such a cynical like gimmick and it was inauthentic, and that's why people didn't like it. The whole movie, the fact that they ignored the 2 beloved movies that came before it, that a lot of people, myself included, have a real deep attachment to, and instead they made some like parody of it. Yeah, I hated that because it was inauthentic and it shat on something that was important to me, so I didn't like the movie. But not liking the movie for those reasons are different for not liking the movie because it had 4 women in it. And I think when you look at She-Hulk, there are a lot of things that people are criticizing it for unfairly because it is a story told from a female perspective. It's a female forward story. And that's fine because it's a female superheroine origin story. And the first point I will say as to why She-Hulk was really, really good is because it was a superhero origin story told cohesively that just happened to have a female superhero being created. And what the show did well is they gave this female character, Jen Walters, superpowers, and then looked at how that impacted her life. And she went on a journey of hating the superpowers at first and then losing them and realizing she appreciated them. I mean, it's the classic superhero origin arc. It's exactly like Spider-Man. Spider-Man gets bitten by a radioactive spider and he develops superpowers. And at first he hates them and he uses them incorrectly, and his Uncle Ben dies because of it. And then he comes to realize there's responsibility to having these powers, but also opportunities. And nobody complains about the fact that it's a 16-year-old Jewish kid from Queens that he's got to handle going to school and supporting his friends and having a secret identity. All of these things people don't even blink an eye at. But when you put a woman in that same situation, really in She-Hulk, what they did is just pose those exact same challenges, and she just dealt with it differently because she's a woman. And I think the authentic part of She-Hulk, what I liked about it, was the fact that the character they invented in Jen Walters, played by Titania Maslany, was actually a really good, really compelling human character. She was kind of like, she's very smart, but she's a little bit small and mousy and insecure about her looks. She tries to overcompensate by throwing herself into her career. She's obviously wants to have validation of men dating her, but when she gets these superpowers, she realizes the men who date her because she's She-Hulk, not because she's a Jennifer. And then when she meets Daredevil, who's blind, so he can't see the difference between She-Hulk and Jennifer, he falls for Jennifer. There's a lot of really authentic human experience in that, and I think Jen is a really, really well written character. And I think the journey that she goes on in the 9 episodes of She-Hulk works really, really well. And I know I made a video with the first episode of She-Hulk, and I was criticizing the fact that she gained prowess over her powers so quickly. And what was really satisfying to me when I watched it was at the very end, you realized that she hadn't. I mean, there was the bit where the intelligentsia put up the video screen of her sex tape, and she hulks out and goes into a rage, and she controls herself. But at that moment, it pays off the fact that she was arrogant and dislikable when she was learning to use her Hulk powers, because eventually she realizes she didn't have the control over them that she thought she did. It's an arc. It's a character arc. And a lot of us, when we watched that first episode, myself included, we were like, oh, she's kind of tedious. We don't like it. She's kind of arrogant. Oh, isn't it stupid writing? She's Mary Sue that she learned to master her powers so quickly. And it wasn't really that. The whole point was that she was kind of arrogant about it, and she was kind of unlikable about it. And it paid off later in the story where she got her comeuppance. And that's really good writing. That's objectively good writing. There's a character arc, and to have a satisfying story, you have to break your hero down before you can make her rise again. And I liked that. I thought that was really, really strong. The other elements that people criticize about it are things like the intelligentsia and the fact that the bad guys are like spoiled incel bullies. And here's the reality of it, that if you are a young professional woman, there are dickbags out there on the internet insecure men who get obsessively, wound up about you. And women get stalked in real life. They get cyber stalked. They get doxxed. They get their nudes leaked. These things happen to women on a very regular basis. That's part of being a woman in the 21st century. And I think if you're one of these people who watches it and watches She-Hulk and doesn't like the intelligentsia because you feel like it's kind of misrepresenting guys in some way, then I feel like you might see some of yourself in some of the broad strokes of the characters they paint as the intelligentsia. And you should be thinking about that, because I watched it and I thought the intelligentsia are a bunch of incel douchebags, but I didn't feel threatened by that as a man, because I'm not that kind of man. I definitely consider myself more in Daredevil's stable there. So I think if you didn't like the intelligentsia aspect, then first of all, I think you need to have a little more empathy for women, because that they actually have to deal with that shit. And secondly, I think you need to look at yourself and wonder why that representation knocked you so much. Because one thing that I've learned in life is that if somebody says something that offends you, normally it's because there's a grain of truth to it. It's a very important rule, that. Like, if somebody said something to me like, oh, I don't know, Roland, you're dumb, or you're ugly, then I'd laugh at them because I'm intelligent and handsome. But if someone come up and said, I don't know, maybe I was a people pleaser, or maybe I was pretentious, like, those two things might annoy me, because, to be honest, maybe I'm a bit of a people pleaser. Definitely am a bit pretentious. So it's interesting. You only ever get offended by things that that seem a little true. And I think the guys and the kind of male audience who's getting so upset by the intelligentsia as a bad guy and or being anti-man and stuff, you got to question why you find that so offensive, because I didn't. There we go. And I'm not. And that's the other thing. I mean, I'm doing this video about She-Hulk, but I'm not coming at it as like a liberal, left-wing, woke person. I am not. I am none of those things. I am an absolutely tedious small C conservative white man. I read Lee Child books. I love James Bond. I love cars. I love watching UFC fights. And certainly I read romance books and I write romance books, and I'm comfortable with certain things that people view as like feminine, I guess. But I'm a man and I like men stuff. And so I'm specifically not the sort of person who She-Hulk was created for. And yet I don't really have any problem with it, and I can see objectively where it is good. And let's continue with that. Where was it good? Well, the other thing that I thought was good kind of annoyed me at the end. But I made my peace with it. The final episode, all of these strings that have been leading up to the end, with like the Intelligentsia, they steal Jen's blood, what's going on with Bruce going off to space, what's going on with Emil Blonsky, is he a bad guy or a good guy? All of the different threads came together in this exciting conclusion, and I was watching it and I was like, yeah, I'm all for this, I'm loving this. And then Jen Walters comes in and goes through the fourth wall and literally crawls through the screen of Disney Plus and goes and talks to the writers of the show. And I remember watching that, being quite taken out of it, being like, oh, okay. And then she has this conversation with Kevin Feige, the guy in charge of the Marvel Universe. What if he was really a robot? She has that, she rewrites it. And I remember at the time, my first reaction was kind of feeling like that was a cop-out. That was a cheap shot. And one piece of criticism that isn't entirely unwarranted is Jen sitting there saying like, oh, this ending doesn't make any sense. This ending is predictable. And it kind of insulting the audience who were enjoying that, who would have enjoyed that ending. And I was enjoying that ending. If they had wrapped things up with a traditional Marvel conclusion, I would have walked away satisfied. So I kind of felt like that was a bit of a dig at me, who's just sitting there trying to enjoy the show, and now you're insulting me. But fair enough. I ended up making peace with it, because if you read the comics, She-Hulk literally crawls from one pane of the comics into another pane. She'll literally tear her way through one page to reach another page. She talks to the writers. She talks to people in the real world universe about what's going on in Marvel. So it was 100% lifted from the comics. And to a certain extent, you had to have that section. She'd broken the fourth wall all the way through in cute ways, which is great. But in some ways, you needed to have this big tentpole, break the fourth wall, talk to the writers, just like Jen did in the comics. Because that's one of the things that defines She-Hulk as a character. And they had this scene, and they put it in, and yeah, it changed the ending, and it wrapped everything up in a different way. And for somebody who was kind of invested in the story, I felt taken out of it, and then kind of insulted. But afterwards I was like, well, they needed to have this bit with Jen breaking the fourth wall, so they did it, and this is how it ended up. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I think now I look back, I'm more okay with them possibly having an ending that I wasn't entirely on board with, except having that big fourth wall break. I'm happy with that than I would have been if they just wrapped things up in a traditional Marvel way and not had that fourth wall break. You needed that. And I think that's really the thing that annoys me about all of the criticism that Jessica Gao is getting, because for all of the originality and the brilliant ideas that she brought to She-Hulk, there were also parts of it that she kind of got saddled with. I mean, they made points of the fact that that Jessica Gao could do whatever she wanted with Daredevil as a character as long as he had his red and gold suit, which is important. So had to have his red and gold suit. She ended up weaving that into the plot with him meeting the guy who makes suits for superheroes. That was clever. The beginning part, the first episode, where Jen learns to be a Hulk, I think now, I mean, obviously that was clearly setting things up for the fact that Bruce is going to go into space, he's going to meet his son, and his son comes back here. But also, this was actually setting up the fact that Bruce, who's written this huge binder and thinks he knows everything about being a Hulk, doesn't necessarily know as much about being a Hulk as he thinks he does. And also, his experiences, like splitting into two separate personalities, are different to most of the people who become Hulk's experiences, like Emil Blonsky and like Jen Walters herself. Like they are not mentally messed up in the head the same way that Bruce is. So I think that scene in particular, which I kind of didn't like at the time, because I was like, oh, Jen's brilliant at everything. Of course, she's such a Mary Sue. I realise now, first of all, it pays off that she wasn't as brilliant and everything as she thinks she was. And that was satisfying in the series. But also, I think that sets up when they eventually tie up all of the plot threads with the Bruce and the Hulk and his son and Sakaar and stuff. That's going to play into the fact that Bruce doesn't know as much about being a Hulk as he thinks he does. So that was another narrative element that Jessica Gao kind of got like stuck with. And I think she handled it really, really well. And I can understand why dumb people like me, might have got confused and might have taken it the wrong way when we watched that first episode, but it pays off in the end, and it's going to pay off a long way in the distance. So there are certain elements like that, having to break the fourth wall, having to have Daredevil in there, although they handled Daredevil brilliantly. That was one of the best episodes when they introduced Daredevil. That stuff, the origin story, I thought those were all handled really, really well. So objectively, as an origin story for a female superhero, I think She-Hulk was great. And I think what people don't like about it is the fact that, yeah, it's not written with men as the target audience, because Jen is a female superhero. She's a particular type of woman. She's a professional, high-achieving woman who has sacrificed certain things like having a family and a love life and stuff for her career, and she's so intent on a career because she has a certain insecurity inside of herself, just like, and I say that's not an insult, just like Steve Rogers was super insecure about being a weak guy. He wanted to be strong and do the right thing. He had a selfishness in that, in the same way that Jen Walters had a selfishness, but they end up, that blossoms into something noble when they get their superpowers. So you can't complain about Jen as a character in any way, because everything that was strong and weak about her was stuff that was strong and weak in male characters. We don't complain about the fact that Tony Stark is a complete asshole, whereas if Jen Walters is kind of like a bit snippy and arrogant, everyone lays on her. She's unlikable. It's this weird thing. And I mean, as I said, I'm not woke in any way. I'm not politically correct. I really am the most tedious, middle-of-the-road bloke you are ever going to see. But I do think it is interesting how we will crucify female characters for being unlikable, whereas we'll almost celebrate male characters for being unlikable. But it works. I think a lot of women who I've spoken to who watched She-Hulk liked it, because I hang out with a lot of professional women who saw certain aspects of themselves in Jen. She resonated with them as a character. Her journey developing these superpowers and then losing them and then getting them back, that resonated with them. It was a show that was specifically written for, I don't know, 30-year-old professional women or 25-year-old aspiring professional women. And I think it did a really good job speaking authentically to them. And then people like me, if you got a bit of joy in your heart and you can appreciate stuff, even if it's not made specifically for you, I had a bloody good time. I really enjoyed that show. So I think it was really, really objectively good. I'm really excited to see Jen Walters back wherever she's going to fit into the MCU next. I would love to have a season 2 of She-Hulk, and I would watch the hell out of it. And you know what? Jessica Gao, I am sorry that people are being dickbags to you on the internet. And don't listen to any of them. They're all a bunch of wankers. You did a really good job. And I think you should be really proud of yourself, and I think Disney should be really proud of you as well. She-Hulk was great. Let's have some more of it as soon as we can. Anyway, that's my hot take on She-Hulk. Let me know if you agree down in the comments below or disagree. Always interested to hear that. And whichever way that you decide, stay by, and I will be back with some more videos in the future. So, cheerio. I'm Roland Hume. I've sold 67,000 copies of my books. If you want to find out how I did it, I've got the link right here you can click. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more videos coming soon. Thank you.